Let that ointment sit for 10 minutes or you'll die. Don't let it sit for 12 or I'll have to hunt down what you become. Can't you just buy a guest badge? Thank you for asking, Morty. That would be a symbolic expression of support for this genre. Then how do we get in? With a little help from some old friends.
It's a rare condition this day and age to read any good news on the newspaper page. And love and tradition of the grand design, some people say, is even harder to find. Well, then there must be some magic clue inside these gentle walls. 'Cause all I see is a tower of dreams, real love bursting out of every scene.
Hey everybody, welcome back to What the Hell Happened to Them? The Rock cast continues on this season with Dwayne Johnson. Joining me usually is Joe Vekeman. Sadly, he's feeling ill as of the 30 minutes before this recording, but that's all right because we have a wonderful guest lined up, the non-cannibal, Braden Schlueter.
Hello, Patrick. Thanks for having me back.
Of course, you may remember him from the Uncut Gems episode, a wonderful up-and-coming director. I actually got to see some footage from his most recent shoot. It looks like it's going to be a very interesting project, so I can't wait for that to be finished. How's that editing coming along?
It's coming all right. We're just working on the first cut of it, putting together some sound stuff on the side. I'm doing the score for it as well, and so my editor and I have been sort of working alongside each other, trying to pair the edit with the music and sort of get it to where we want to have it for the upcoming deadline for that project.
Fantastic. The multi-hyphenate Braden Schlueter is kicking down doors everywhere. All right, so Braden, our film this week is Furious 7. Is that the right title? They feel like they changed them up on me.
It is, I believe, the right title,
okay.
Yes, because it was like Fast 5 something 6. Fast and Furious 6.
Here's the frustrating thing with Fast and Furious 6 is that when you rent it and you search it online, it says Fast and Furious 6. But then when the movie begins, the title is like Fast 6. And I go, make up your mind, movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's confusing. It's one of those weird things where I also don't know which one is which ever. Yeah. And so that doesn't help the naming conventions or lack of naming convention that they have utilized. It just furthers my confusion.
Yeah, I wonder if it was like that Tom Cruise movie that was like Edge of Tomorrow when it was in theaters. And then when I saw
it was like Live, Die, Repeat
now. Like, make up your mind.
They went back to Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat or something like that. They just like did both of them. They're like, someone's going to recognize one of those names.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. Well, Braden, would you like to give us a plot summary of Furious 7?
I'll try my best.
Okay.
Essentially, so I haven't seen the previous one in several years.
Sure.
More than several years. But from my recollection, from what Furious 7 has given me, is that Luke Evans, I believe, was the bad guy in the last one with the incredibly long airstrip. Yep. He's hospitalized. Jason Statham comes in with the MCU-esque post-credit scene and sort of making it a personal vendetta against Vin Diesel and his crew, launching us into Furious 7. And it's essentially Jason Statham hunting them, seeking revenge for his brother.
Yep, I think that's pretty concise. The movie does do, in typical Hollywood fashion, does do a good job of catching you up if you have not seen anything else. Very nice of them to do that. What else was interesting about this film was that it reminds us that Big Brother is always watching, but doesn't seem interested in exploring the moral implications of that.
Oh, yeah, just wanton use of government tools to invade everyone on the planet's privacy and rights as a citizen.
Yeah, it was just which side could use it, and we wanted our side to use it and didn't care about like, should any, right? Isn't this but the Dark Knight sort of tackles this a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And the funny thing is, they're like, in the Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan is an intelligent enough director and writer to be like, maybe we should have our hero realize this thing is extreme and destroy it, as opposed to this film, which is like,
it's like,
oh no, we lost it.
Yeah.
Let's try and get it back so we can control the Predator drones flying around LA.
Yeah, and at least there was Morgan Freeman being like, this isn't really a good thing. You know that, right? And he goes, yes, but just this once. So, like, it tries to walk it back. But this movie's like, well, we want it for our benefit. And then the movie ends, and it's still out there. It's still floating around for the government to use. The Kurt Russell,
or for the government to lose.
Yeah,
again.
Exactly. Apparently, it's really easy to steal if your cars are fast enough.
I guess the implication is that it's just on a tablet. Is that what happens? Is because they lose it in that plant, and it's just like an iPad with like the USB drive in it, and then
it's that easy.
That's that. It's all. They have no way to stop that from being stolen. Apparently,
no. But at least that the Vin Diesel has the one person in the world who I guess can crack into it. So that is a convenient tool to have there. Kurt Russell's seeming to be the nicest federal agent in a Hollywood movie in recent memory, as I kept waiting for the moment when he was going to like betray them to take the drive, but he was like, all right, good, you did the job. Well, let's go do your thing now. And I was like, oh, this is very nice of Kurt Russell.
He's just a good dude. He pre-assembles Vin Diesel's crew. He, talks to The Rock off screen. He gets them all the stuff they need. Yeah. He joins the fight in later in the film. Yeah. So have you seen the next one? The 8 one? Yes, I have, unfortunately.
Is he in that? Okay. Is he in that one? Because his ending is sort of a little ominous. Like, I kept waiting for, like, the angle we get of him with the sun setting and the helicopter very far in the distance. I'm like, is it going to explode? Is it going to be the bad guy's helicopter? Like, why would they we sort of just leave him in the desert for the rest of the movie? Like, does anything happen with him in that one or the Hobbs and Shaw thing?
He's in 8, I believe. Right. To be completely honest, I remember so little from that film other than I didn't like it, but there's a couple of good sequences in it, I guess. But yeah, I honestly don't remember what his role was in the next film.
So that's interesting. You didn't like it, and we'll discuss that a little bit. But I wanted to ask you, and Joe, but sadly he's not here. Did you start like watching from the beginning, or did you come on in the middle and then kind of go back?
So I was there at the beginning.
Okay.
With the Fast and the Furious, 2001 was it?
Yeah.
That film was sort of like this strange cultural touchdown in a lot of ways. It ended up influencing a lot of other media somehow, like through video games and other films doing this sort of street racing thing. And yeah, I didn't see the third one, Tokyo Drift, for a long time because I watched the second one. I thought the second one was complete trash, and so I was like, that makes sense. I don't know why they made the second one. Really, I understand why Vin Diesel didn't want to come back to this.
Yeah,
and then they did that sort of soft reboot, which I didn't see right away. But then, like when Fast 5 came out, I picked it up again.
Okay,
and I've seen the rest since then. And I went back and I had seen Tokyo Drift. So I kind of filled in the bad sequels, so to speak, after the fact.
I mean, it sounds like you almost made a good play there because weirdly, Tokyo Drift takes place much later than the later movies.
Yeah, that was always a little confusing to me. Or just like the choice behind that. Yeah. I guess Justin Lin and the writer found it necessary with the Han subplot, but I was never they never really explicitly state that at any point. You just kind of find out, as far as I know, like when Han dies and then when Han's alive is sort of your marker as to when things are taking place.
It always confused. I was grilling Joe in Fast Furious 6 because I'm just like, well, why didn't they just get a different Asian guy? Like that guy could really be anybody. Why did it have to be this one minor character from Tokyo Drift? He didn't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think 5 on he gained like this following, and that's why people were upset when he got killed off, and why I suppose why he's back in the 9th one.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in a magical world where nobody dies for long, right?
This is basically just another superhero franchise at this point. So, yeah, it's very much in that MCU formula of like people can flirt with the idea of dying maybe for half of a film, and then they'll always come back some point.
The movie even opens up with the guy I thought died in the last movie, like in a hospital in this movie. So I'm just like, it doesn't matter. At some point, when Gal Gadot has done enough Wonder Woman films, they'll get her back too. Like nobody died on that tarmac, it seems.
Yeah, she all she did was fall into a dark abyss.
Which is what he did, which is what this guy did. And he's fine.
Yeah, it's foolproof. You can do anything. If they just fall into a dark abyss, you can always bring them back. There's always a way they survive.
So anyway, to circle back to my question of asking when you got into it, which was actually earlier than I thought. I mean, did you watch Fast and Furious in theater? I guess I thought you were a little too young for that.
Not in the theater. I saw it when it had come out on video, though.
Okay.
So I remember, and then like seeing it was on television a lot for some reason. I guess it's just one of those easy sort of Saturday afternoon things they can just like program in at like 2 p.m. But I remember renting it with friends, and then it was just always on TV, it seemed like. So I'd seen it multiple times probably. Yeah.
So you may remember early 2000s like that, GTA, Gone in 60 Seconds, even a little bit of NASCAR had it. Like cars going fast was just like a big theme of the early millennium. So I'm not surprised this movie got made then and did well. But like I have only come in since the fifth movie. I think I saw parts of the fourth movie, at least when they're racing through tunnels. I remember that. But really focusing from the fifth movie on and getting here felt like a huge jump from where we started in the fifth one, where it was like, we're just going to sort of assemble a crew, steal some money from this guy that was sort of a jerk to us, and then we get to go retire. And now it's like, all right, we're fighting international crimes and black op agents and saving the world. It just feels like a huge jump, and I imagine the first one is much more tame and much more like car-centric and a little more grounded. Does it feel weird if you started with that first movie and now you find yourself like here and they're like they're driving over like bridges to attack helicopters and The Rock's walking around with a gun shooting down drones? Is this odd to you?
It doesn't seem that odd to me, frankly, because I think the amount of time that has passed between the first one and then, like Fast 5 even had been so many years. And then they kind of did that soft reboot with the one before, the Fast and the Furious. And so it's like they knew that they were taking the franchise in a different direction. And I think the audiences just sort of picked up on that instinctually. And so like, I think there's a lot of people who aren't that familiar actually with the first a couple entries anyway. For me, I also think that it was good for them to sort of stray away from that earlier formula simply because I don't think they could really take it anywhere after the first one, which is why I think the second one was so bad too, is because they tried to sort of keep it in that similar arena of, FBI agents and cops and like these underground sort of criminal rings and keeping it sort of low scale. And then it just wasn't that interesting. And like the execution was poor. So, and as you might know, like none of these films have that great of writing or character development or anything. So it's not something where it's like, it's a very simple setup and then it can be carried by the narrative and the performances. It's something where it's like, if they don't have the sort of over the top action, then it sort of loses steam pretty early on. So they just doubled down on the latter part of that and just kind of went wild with it.
Yeah, it just felt to me how crazy big the stakes kind of jumped between just those three movies. But what really made it stand out was looking at this Paul Walker tribute at the end of the film. And I was just like, oh yeah, wasn't this film about like stealing cars or something? And now we've gotten here. But it sounds like you're saying most audiences like, nope, this is all sort of in the same universe. And it's even better now. And probably you're right. I have to imagine that first one, even though it sets up everything, is just feels like not as fun as whatever everybody's doing here as they're jumping into cars in slow motion, passing the hot potato around, as they say. So probably a good choice they made. Yeah,
I would say so. Judging by just the financial success and sort of the fact that they're making the ninth one, I think the most impressive thing is they're basically able to bring this back from the dead, because as far as I was concerned, after the second one, this thing was basically completely flatlined as far as the franchise goes. And so the fact that they could bring everyone back at a certain point and, turn it into this successful thing after two, arguably, some people like Tokyo Drift. I really don't care about the second or third films that much at all. And so it was sort of impressive to see it come back in any form.
Yeah, my old cinematographer back east, he's a huge Vin Diesel fan, huge, for all the time I've known him. He tells me that Tokyo Drift had been meant to be this sort of straight-to-DVD film, and yet it wasn't testing well for probably many reasons, but the one thing they kept kind of pointing to was that none of the characters from the first two films are in this, so it just feels like a very different thing. You just shouldn't even call it Fast and the Furious. So that was part of why they wanted to kind of get the Vin Diesel, even for just sort of this cameo appearance. But to do that, they had to give him the rights to his character, Riddick. Are you familiar with Pitch Black and these other Riddick sequels?
Oh, yeah. Pitch Black, Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah, what a weird sort of trilogy of films.
Yeah, it is a strange trilogy. I kind of like Pitch Black from what I remember. The Chronicles of Riddick was bad. And then I think they tried to go back to the Pitch Black thing with Riddick. And then that movie, as far as I remember, again, it has been many years since I've visited that franchise, being very forgettable. And then I think that kind of killed it, didn't it, after that? Yeah,
I as far as I know, Vin Diesel's still very much trying to do more with it. I watched Pitch Black when it came out in theaters because I was, a schoolboy, and I was really into aliens. So of course I saw anything that had aliens in it. And that movie was fun. It was a fine movie. It was an interesting kind of conceit. But then, I don't know, like 4, 5, 6 years later, the second one comes out, Chronicles of Riddick. It looks so completely different and feels very different. I didn't even know it was a sequel until my cinematographer friend told me that, oh yeah, that's Pitch Black 2. Remember that movie? That movie was cool. And I go, wait, what? This is like weird space society happening. Where is the hunt for the monster, the alien style hunt through this landscape? Just feels like an odd shift to make.
Yeah, it was very strange, and it didn't really fit in that well with the first film. And I don't know what led them to that path. I guess if we look back at the time period, maybe that was sort of like the bigger spectacle sci-fi fantasy type thing could have been in vogue then. But it was a very odd shift. And then the interesting thing about that, though, too, is that he had a video game based on the Riddick character. It was actually like incredibly well received. I remember playing that game and it was very good.
Oh, okay.
And
all right.
And the game was more like in the Pitch Black territory where it was like you're running around, like I think you're in a prison. It's like a prequel or something that's tied into it and you're like escaping a prison. And so it's interesting where he's trying to have that franchise go. I don't know what he plans to do with it now, but maybe they'll find a way to resuscitate that one as well.
What was also interesting about Pitch Black was, like, I wouldn't even count him as the main character, and yet he carries 2 other movies afterwards because they kill off the main character in Pitch Black at the end of it.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those things where it's like they make the interesting supporting character the main character, and then it's like, well, he was much better as sort of a supporting character who could like come in and out of the different scenes, and when it's focused on him, it loses its way a little bit.
We don't have much to do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
it was so Vin Diesel and the woman from Lost, he's trying to remind her of her memories, so they do some racing. They go to has this thing been in the movie before? It was just felt like odd naming that they would call it Race Wars. I feel like somebody in the Hollywood boardroom could have been like, can we workshop that a little bit? Or was this like a 2001 thing that they brought back?
That was the 2001 thing.
Okay.
That was
so they were kind of stuck with it.
Name of the original sort of race that was there.
Paul Walker's wife seems to hate telling Paul Walker she's pregnant. Anytime she gets pregnant, other people have to convince her to tell him. I feel bad for her character. Does she get to do a lot in the other movies? Because in every movie I see her in, she's sort of like, all right, well, now that you're married, you sort of just go back in the corner and sit this one out.
She was always kind of just floating around in the peripheries of the story. Like in the first one, she has a bigger role because she's kind of Paul Walker's into the underground street racing arena. But even then, she doesn't have a ton to do. She is definitely more involved than in these newer films where she does just sort of pop in at the beginning and then pop in at the very end again, just to remind you that she's still a character in the universe. But we were talking about The Rock knowing that the drone was coming through the tunnel.
Yes.
And I believe that was just chalked up to the fact that it's The Rock. So, of course, he knows that that's going to be there then.
He says rock powers.
I was just saying that right before or shortly before that happens, I'll always love the moment when he breaks out of his cast by simply flexing his arm. I always get a good laugh out of that.
Yeah, clearly going against doctor's orders there.
Yes.
And then just presumably takes off the rest of the cast. And he's like, well, I'll just take off the leg cast. I don't need that. Walk away. And his daughter's like, yeah, you go get him, Dad. But if his daughter was like 10 years older, she'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Get back in that bed.
You're absolutely not going out there, you idiot.
And I feel bad, and it's probably only because I started on the fifth movie. I seem to have a soft spot for Vin Diesel's like Brazilian love interest from the cop from the one surviving cop from that movie. And then like I was like, and then in the next movie he like ditches her for the girl from Lost, and I was like, no. But she's way better. And then she went off to go with The Rock. But then she's barely in this movie, too. I feel bad she didn't get to go in and help The Rock save the day.
Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of bummed about that, too, because I did enjoy her character in Fast Five. And I'm not sure why that was, because I think it's just like they kept on bringing back like these people from, or like these new stars or these previous cast members, and so they just ended up having to squeeze some people out.
It's too big. It's too much going on.
Yeah, it's too big of a movie. You can't contain it.
Yes, unfortunate. I was actually worried they were going to kill her off because she feels like she's in that territory now where like they're kind of stuck with her, but they don't really need her. So like when The Rock's saying goodnight to her at the beginning of the movie and she gets in the car, I'm like, oh, this is a perfect time for a car bomb. This is when the car bomb happens, and The Rock's like, oh no. And then he has to go get Vin Diesel to chase down Jason Statham. But fortunately, it went off a little more ridiculous than that, but that's okay. That's what the movie promised.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, they'll definitely, who knows, they could always go back to that at some point, because I feel like with this focus on family that they keep on sort of throwing at the audience every 20 minutes, you know, they need some way to make the stakes very personal. So, of course, killing off the minor love interest from a previous film is probably the easiest way for them to navigate those waters.
I guess she barely feels like part of the family anymore. And then Paul Walker gets kicked out of the family because I guess he's got a different family now. But they only did that right because he died, right? And that's why I'm looking at like weird CGI Paul Walker in the car at the end.
Yeah, it's them patching together this sort of composite of his brothers and footage that they had of him, and it was very tragic when it happened. I think that all things considered, though, you know, they pulled it off reasonably well for the situation. And I do think the ending is very effective, too, personally. Yeah,
it feels like the time to do it. Of all the movies I'd seen, like, this is your good off-ramp for that character.
Yeah, it works well within the narrative of the universe that they have. And I think that the way that they crafted it is very sweet and touching. And it's nice that they were able to do it in a way that was that sort of tactful, and they didn't have to do some sort of a plot thing where you know, he's inexplicably dead or something like that, and like they were able to give him like a proper send off, and I think it was a good way to do it and a good way to remember him by too. Like, I think that there's no way it could have really gone better in that regard.
Yeah, they really had, because the problem is like 2 movies before, he's promised his wife, okay, one last job. And now yet again, it's one. So they really had to make sure we believed it was one last job. And so they give it sort of the time they need for them to do that. But like, is his death why we don't get a post-credit scene in this? Or did had they only planned to kind of come back and just do the 4, or were they going to go as long as they could? Like, why do you think we didn't get that this time?
I think that this was originally conceived by Justin Lin, maybe as like a trilogy of sorts. At least originally
5 through 7.
Yeah, 5, 6, 7. Because I think he was also supposed to direct this one before James Wan ended up with the job, and that might be one of the reasons. And then also, yeah, I think that part of it too is definitely influenced by the fact that they want to end it, you know, with that sort of tribute to Paul Walker, and not really make it about setting up another sequel and sort of leaving everyone on that note, which I think makes a lot of sense. And so, like, I don't know which one had the greater sort of influence over that decision, but I do think that it was the right decision.
Yeah, so that's interesting you bring up James Wan, right? Am I confused? Isn't he sort of more known for horror these days?
Yeah. He definitely, like, his entire career, I think, has been mainly shaped by that. And I think that he is sort of an underrated director in a lot of ways. I really liked his Conjuring films. And then Insidious, I think, is pretty good as well. And I think that you can see some of what he likes to do with the camera sort of coming through in this film. Like you were saying with the opening sequence, it's sort of like this, quasi oneer of sorts that sort of sets up the movie and Jason Statham's character pretty well. And, he's used similar techniques in the Conjuring films. And I think he adds quite a bit to the franchise just as a director. And I do like the his sort of focus on using practical effects as well, as opposed to CGI, because a lot of the stunts that they did too were done practically, like even, throwing the planes or throwing the cars out of the plane, they threw cars out of a plane.
Yeah.
So like, I always respect that when filmmakers are able to do a lot of that stuff practically, because I think it makes a big difference in the final product.
Yep, I'm also pro practical effects. I'm actually very impressed at sort of seeing James Wan's range, that he could do this and sort of the horror films that he's more well known for.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so, you brought up some movies, some very famous movies he's known for. I actually don't like their scripts. I do think that they are well directed, though. I just am I'm impressed by what's on the page.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the reason why I enjoy The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 in particular are because of sort of the scares that he crafts in those films. Of course, there are, the requisite jump scares that exist in there, but the most memorable sequences are sort of set up like these, set pieces where they sort of grow and build. And there's always this sort of unique element to them. Like in the first Conjuring film, when they're playing that clapping game, it ends up being a very effective sequence, I think, when, it's not her children making the claps and she sort of follows them around the house. And I think stuff like that, the way he does it is very intelligent and makes it for a horror film that's sort of above just simple jump scares. And I appreciate that in his craft. And I also think that he sort of ties together a pretty good emotional thread in those movies, despite sort of what he's working with in the scripts. And I think that that's one of the reasons too why the ending of Furious 7 with Paul Walker's send-off is effective in it being very emotional and touching, is because I think he, despite him mainly just being a horror director, he does know how to sort of craft those moments to have more emotional impact. And so I think that he was a good director to have on this film in particular, just with that scenario sort of unfolding before them and having to deal with that.
Yeah, the emotional thread's a good point. It's not one I sort of focus on with him, but that is something that isn't to be overlooked. What I like that he can do, or even things that I don't think are on the page, which is why I give him more credit than the script, because like he likes to hide things in the background, and like you can see somebody kind of walk down a hallway, and then through like an open door, there's just like a thing there kind of setting up what the rest of the scene is going to take place. Like he knows how to kind of lace in this feeling of dread that sets up some anticipation for us later on that don't always pay off as well, but I like the effort that he puts in.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of visual creativity too in those films. In particular, like in the second one, like I always remember the scene where like the girl gets sucked into this like locked room and it's filled with all these crosses, and then they start slowly turning upside down, sort of, and the camera pans across the room with her, and then we end up like in this dark corner, and then that's when the jump scare happens. But it's sort of like this just very striking visual sensibility that he has that I think really elevates those scripts that you're talking about, like, being weaker scripts, are much helped out by his visual style and how he likes to set all of it up.
And that I think is almost harder to do, because we take advantage, you and I are both sort of writer directors, we take advantage of the fact that like these things are in a head, we put them on the page, and then we just sort of, to get everybody else on the same boat with us, and then we just sort of go out and shoot it. But James Wan has to kind of take other people's material and find a way to really kind of add to it to make it his own, and then have it kind of elevate beyond that. So to be able to do that and put that sense of visual styling onto something that isn't even his initially, like that is a challenge that's sort of harder for me to fathom, and sort of impresses me all the more.
Yeah, I think that it is an incredibly impressive thing. And, just sitting down with the page and like you see something of like, it'll be something as simple as like, oh, this girl gets put into this locked room. It's very scary. And then like the jump scare happens, and like him sitting down and being like, how can we make this something that has a lot of tension and suspense in it, and that is, above what's on the page. And I think that his visual style too, it's interesting because like, I don't know if you've seen Aquaman,
No, I'm not.
So there's this specific sequence in Aquaman where they're on this boat in the sea, and then it's being attacked by these sea creatures, and then there's shot of them diving into the water with like this red flare, and it's this very well framed composition of them diving into the ocean with this red flare, and you see all the sea creatures sort of follow them. Essentially, that small sequence was able to get a spin-off film somehow greenlit because it was like so visually striking. Everyone like loved that sequence so much that they're like, let's make a spin-off about like those sea monsters.
Oh my God.
It's very strange, but like it was a very striking visual. And I think that, that is his biggest strength, and being able to weave those into these, somewhat lackluster scripts really shows.
Yes. So definitely a man who's sort of putting all of his effort in there. You could sleepwalk through some of those scripts, but he chose not to. They've all gone on to become major franchises because of it. Part of it's helped the genre that they're in, but James Wan, great horror director of our modern time. But we have to kind of pivot back to The Rock because we are a rock podcast.
That's true.
The Rock, not in this movie very much. He does kind of come in to save the day twice. At the end, for probably contractual reasons, they put that in the script. What do you think of The Rock's performance here? And then I ask this question to every guest we have on. What is the deal with The Rock? Why does America seem to love him so much? Explain it to me, Patrick, a guy who doesn't quite get it yet.
I think that it's fits well in with what they are looking for this film. I mean, I think every film that comes out in this franchise, they embrace the ridiculousness of all of it. And so, I mean, this one in particular, they're all very aware of just how insane some of the stuff is that's happening. And I mean, like, the delivery of his line when he's like, "Daddy's got to go to work," whatever it is just like, I think it works so well. And like, he knows what movie he's in, and just everything that he does is so on key, I think, with what it needs. So I think it's a good performance by The Rock, and it really fits in well with the direction this franchise has taken.
Agreed.
In terms of the fascination with The Rock and his sort of career trajectory is something that I've been trying to wrap my head around as well, because I'm not entirely sure what the appeal is. I understand the fact that he seems to be a very charismatic person. Like, he's a big screen presence, obviously, but the choices he makes of what to be in are just so baffling to me, because it's like, why do we need to see like this rampage film that's not that much different than like San Andreas, that's really not that much different than, what was the Dante's Inferno one?
The Dante's Inferno one, wasn't that San Andreas?
No.
Is there another volcano movie he does?
No, not that. Shoot, what am I thinking of? Wrong film. Hold on. I have to look at his filmography.
I'm thinking of Dante's Peak. Dante's Inferno. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, there's a movie where The Rock goes to hell.
Let me verify some information.
Okay.
Here. I probably misspoke here. What's the name of that film that he did it? It was like in the last 3 years, and it was basically a remake of another film, and it's not called Dante's Inferno. It's called something else that's similar.
I don't know. I don't know most of The Rock's movies unless I've seen them already. I'm surprised at how many he's been in.
Oh, sorry. Towering Inferno.
Oh, yes.
Which is
the remake we were all begging
Skyscraper.
for. Yeah.
Where he jumps from a crane onto a skyscraper.
I mean, really, once we got the Poseidon Adventure remake, we should have known that the ripoff of the Poseidon Adventure was also going to get a remake. We should have known.
We should have. It was right there in front of us. But
yeah. Mm-hmm. Charismatic is usually what I hear. Mm-hmm.
I do think, though, that it's sort of, I don't know, like, I don't think he's in that same spot anymore now, though. Like, I think it was, the peak of that was sort of this time period of like 2015 through just a couple years, or like 2017, 2018, maybe. Like, I don't know. I don't know if people care about Jungle Cruise. And like Hobbs and Shaw wasn't very well received, and
he's in 2 Jumanjis. I got those to look forward to.
Yeah, I didn't see the last one, but
yeah,
and like in those, I think he's good in too. But I don't know. I can't really if he did more like Pain and Gains, maybe. I think it would be interesting to see that.
Pain and Gain, I enjoyed a surprising amount. I was not expecting, but I didn't know anything about it going in.
I really enjoy Pain and Gain. I think it is a very underrated Michael Bay film. And I think if he does more films like that, I think that he'd become a much more interesting, actor in general. But if he keeps on doing these like Central Intelligences and San Andreas's and Rampages and Baywatch, that's sort of like, I don't know. I've been kind of over him for several years now, but
yeah, those movies,
sure.
I get why he does, because they're like, here, would you like $20 million? And The Rock's like, yeah, why wouldn't I? But like, yeah, the Pain and Gains are interesting. My sort of go-to The Rock film, but it's not really a good performance of his, but like the weirdest film I've seen him in was Southland Tales, a movie I've become obsessed with since we did that episode. Have you familiar with this one?
The Donnie Darko guy, right?
Yeah, Richard Kelly.
Kelly, yeah. I haven't seen it, but I hear it's either something that is completely reviled or completely revered. And I don't know why that is. Maybe you have a better opinion of like the sort of cultural impact it's had, because I think that it's always referenced in those terms of like, it's either like the worst thing ever or it's the best thing ever.
Yeah. If somebody doesn't like it, I get it. I will definitely try to change your mind. I love it because I don't know why. Like nothing about that film should work. All of it's a mess, but somehow it's like a mess in the perfect way. The example I used was like there's an episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns goes to the doctor.
Mr. Burns, I'm afraid you are the sickest man in the United States. You have everything.
You mean I have pneumonia?
Yes.
Juvenile diabetes?
Yes.
Hysterical pregnancy?
A little bit, yes. You also have several diseases that have just been discovered. In you.
You sure you just haven't made thousands of mistakes?
No, I'm afraid not.
Well, this sounds like bad news.
Well, you'd think so, but all of your diseases are in perfect balance. Here's the door to your body, and these are oversized novelty germs. That's influenza, that's bronchitis, and this cute little cuddlebug is pancreatic cancer. Here's what happens when they all try to get through the door at once. Move it, shout ahead. We call it Three Stooges syndrome.
Like, that's what's happening with this movie. It's all so wrong. Somehow it's like an accident. And like now I hear they're trying to like re-tinker it and do a new cut. And I say, no, leave it alone. It shouldn't. You can't do better than you've done. You're lucky you got it this good. Joe and I have recently purchased or pre-ordered, I guess there's a Blu-ray coming out that has the Cannes. That's because this movie premiered at Cannes, fun fact. Has the Cannes cut of it, and it's the only time it's been seen outside of Cannes because it had such a bad screening there. So Joe and I are now going to go and we're going to watch the Cannes version of it and see how it compares.
I'll need to watch it.
Yeah.
I think that your praise for it has sort of been the tipping point for me actually watching it and seeing, which camp I fall into on Southland Tales.
Yeah, listen, if you just go find the episode we did on Southland Tales, you don't have to listen to all of it, and definitely don't recommend it because you don't want spoilers, but just listen to the opening where you hear a line from the movie I took, and right then you'll have to see that movie based on what that one line is.
And what did we do once we discovered a rift in the fourth dimension? We launched monkeys into it.
The soul of a monkey can't survive the dimensional threshold.
Because it's the most ridiculous line ever uttered on screen. It's crazy.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah, and if you want to watch it, I'll lend you the Blu-ray. I'll have that sometime next week.
Okay,
it comes out. Yes, The Rock, charismatic is the word I hear. I'm glad to hear you say you're sort of over it. I never got it, but like I just wonder, because like when we did Adam Sandler, like he was sort of like a whole bunch of different things. Not just sort of serious and comedic actor, but like even all those roles were like his Punch Drunk Love role is different enough from his Uncut Gems, and all of his comedy characters obviously are very different from each other. Hubie Halloween, his newest film, very different from anything he's sort of done before. So like there's just like a lot of directions he goes in. The Rock you bring in because you want The Rock. Just Rock, do your Rock things. And it just like gets sort of old and tired quickly.
It's boring.
Yeah.
Is what it is. Yeah.
So that's been my problem with going through these movies. It's like, The Rock's always going to come in here and he's always going to have like a cool line and like a bright and his pearly white smile and he's going to charm everybody he sees. I'm sort of done with it.
Yeah. And I think, that Pain and Gain, that's why that film's so great. And then as far as The Rock goes, and then also The Other Guys is probably he's hardly in that, but I think that's probably one of my other top Rock films.
And what was interesting that Michael Bay got out of The Rock, I have to assume it was Michael Bay because he hasn't done it in any of his other films. Like there are actually moments where I'm watching The Rock and I'm watching his eyes and his face, and like I'm like, oh, you're actually acting. Like you're actually in a place right now where you're not yourself, but you are in the moment and present as this character. Like it was sort of kind of blew me away.
That's like he's making choices, acting choices in that film, and he's playing a character in that film. And I think that's funny too, because I feel like that's something I wouldn't expect you to expect yourself to say, is that Michael Bay was able to get something out of this actor that no one else has been able to get out of him. No,
Pain and Gain is, I mean, it sort of confirmed some thoughts I had on Michael Bay, but also sort of opened up like, Michael Bay, you could do this if you could just sort of pull back sometimes.
Yeah, there are interesting things there for sure.
Yeah.
But then he decides that like 6 Underground is where he truly wants to place his efforts. So I guess that's what we get.
Yeah, sad for us. We enable him to keep doing whatever he does. So, like, Pain and Gain wasn't clearly his most successful film financially. So, lastly, since this is the 7th film, this film has begun a franchise. I actually wanted to take a look back at like some original films, because the first one was very successful. This first Fast and the Furious film, and then it made me think, well, what were other very successful original screenplays? And I found a list of the most successful original films, and I wanted to go through them with you. And sort of talk about how Hollywood's changed and as it begins to rely more on these big budget things, franchises, temples. Obviously, the first movie based on an original screenplay, Star Wars: A New Hope. No surprise there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Makes complete sense.
It has, ironically, then since spawned off a bunch of films that would not qualify for this category, and now feels like a quarter of all media produced in our country is somehow related to Star Wars. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. No sequel, no reboot. It just sort of was there, and everybody still likes it the way it is.
Yeah, a movie that I personally didn't see the appeal of when I was younger, and when I've revisited it, I'm still not a huge fan of in terms of Spielberg's entire filmography. So maybe I'm missing something. There.
Titanic, which I don't think should count, partly because it's based on real events, but also because there were other Titanic films that came out. So it doesn't. I don't know. It feels a little lazy that this one. Like, I don't know. That's my thought on that.
I'll allow it for just the sort of impact that film has had.
Number 4, Avatar. Clearly a remake, right?
Yeah, that one, the worst part of that film is the fact
Not
that...
an original film. Pocahontas, Dances with Wolves.
It's the least original thing.
We've all made the jokes.
It's like storytelling-wise, screenplay-wise, that probably has happened with James Cameron.
Same director as Titanic. So like he keeps being like, oh, this bold director coming up with these wildly successful original screenplays. Don't think so.
He's like, what can I do to make everyone sort of have a torturous time on this thing while also pushing the envelope of technology?
Yeah. Another head scratcher, The Lion King. Clearly Hamlet, clearly Kimba the White Lion. That's my take on Lion King.
Yes, agree. Not one that should qualify.
Now, this one was actually interesting, number 6. The Sting with Paul Newman and Robert Redford.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's... What's the litmus for being on that list that you found?
It's like just sort of like a screenplay that's not based off of any pre-existing material.
Oh, okay.
Which one shows how bad we are at doing those scripts now, but also how powerful a box office draw Paul Newman was, because he has another movie on this list.
Oh, wow. What's the other one?
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Okay.
A few spots down. In between them, Raiders of the Lost Ark clearly has had many sequels. Ghostbusters had a sequel that nobody liked. Butch Cassidy. Then number 10, Independence Day, now has a sequel.
It does. It was a terrible sequel.
Yeah, of course. Home Alone, number 11, has many sequels and TV movies.
Oh, God, there are TV movies?
Yeah, and the TV movie was particularly weird. I caught it accidentally. I didn't know it was there, but then when it premiered, it just happened to be on the channel I normally watch that night in like 2005. It takes place, they shot it in 2004. It follows the Macaulay Culkin family, but like a year after Home Alone 2. So clearly none of those actors can return because they're all over a decade older. So everybody's replaced, including, and they bring back the bad Joe Pesci's character, but not the other guy. And Joe Pesci's character is now played by French Stewart, because when I think of Joe Pesci, French Stewart's the obvious comp.
Well, I was going to say, like, when you mentioned Pesci, I was like, wait, I didn't know Pesci was in another one. And then that makes sense that he was not in that other one.
French Stewart also replaced Matthew Broderick in Inspector Gadget 2.
Oh, very versatile.
Like, it's just like, yeah, when we can't get the original star back, just put in French Stewart.
Like, we know that he'll occupy whatever role we need him to occupy. Just toss him in there, and that's that.
I wish French Stewart should have played Clarice Sterling when they couldn't get the actress back for Hannibal. That's what I think.
You know, why not? Yeah. Let's see how far we can actually push him.
Beverly Hills Cop has sequels. American Graffiti, George Lucas on this list twice. Very interesting. Blazing Saddles has a sequel. Finding Nemo has a sequel. Here's sort of a really old one. The Greatest Show on Earth. Remember this Cecil B. DeMille pick?
No, I do not.
Yeah, it's got, like, Jimmy Stewart plays a really creepy clown, but, like, he's not supposed to be creepy. We're supposed to feel bad for him. It's just like it's like an our town, but it takes place in a circus.
That sounds kind of horrifying.
Yeah, very odd film, but I'm surprised it made it on there. It must have been like that, the spectacle movie of its day. Back to the Future has many sequels. The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan sort of breaking out here with a twist. Smokey and the Bandit has sequels. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. A lot of aliens on this list, it seems. Rocky, obviously, many sequels. And I actually think that one was based on sort of something. So I don't think that should be on here.
Oh, was it? I don't know that much history behind
like that. I think
Rocky.
The movie The Fighter is like that. That character in real life is the basis of Rocky, I believe.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Number 22, almost at the end of the list. Number 22, the most bizarre movie on this list by far. Twister. Do you remember Twister?
Oh, I do remember Twister. How could you forget the cows flying around the car as they're driving into the storm?
This is a movie that came out and was like big for that year, and then like nobody ever talked about it outside of like the Night of the Twisters, the other like you got a bunch of Twister movies that year, but outside of that, like nobody talked about that movie ever again. So I'm just surprised people have heard of it.
I feel like it's not talked about enough, personally.
It is a Michael Crichton film, so, you know, there you go, I guess. Another old-timey film, It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World. Remember this movie?
I do.
Yeah. Then you have Ghost, and then Monsters, Inc., which now does have a sequel. So that's the top 25 films as reported by Screencraft. Noticeable on that list is the amount of franchises those modern movies kind of spewed out. And I think they did adjust for inflation, which is how some of these older movies made it on there. But like some of these movies are from the 50s. So it just seems odd. I don't know, like the fact that there are other than The Sixth Sense, there are so few movies from this millennium or even like post 80s that are on this list kind of shows, I guess, the direction Hollywood is taking and is sort of like with Star Wars sort of being this big thing and that gets rebooted and remade all the time. And The Matrix is getting rebooted. We talked about this last time too. And now, you know, Fast and Furious has like 10 movies in it, 11 movies in it. I don't know, like it's sort of interesting to sort of look at and be like, I guess this is what we do now. This is how we tell movies. This is how we feed the audience what they want. If we can only make 12 movies because they all cost, you know, $300 million each year, like that's what we have. We have to make sure they all count.
Yeah, it's just a safety thing where familiar brand, you know, they make something unique and then, you know, no one will see it or it'll underperform or it will make like, you know, a decent amount of money, but it doesn't hit $1 billion. And so it's still deemed a failure. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things too, where it's like with just how, like with Tenet, the sort of controversy and of that release. And then, you know, everyone's like, oh, the death of the box office and the death of theaters. And then Tenet comes out. It's like, will Tenet save theaters? And it's still like considering the scenario did well. And then everyone's like, oh, it was Christopher Nolan's first financial failure. It's like, well, the release situation was very different than like Inception or The Dark Knight or any of those things. And so like, and now everyone's throwing stuff on streaming just like day one, like HBO. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's just, they want things to almost be a failure in a way so they can just keep on doing what they know.
Yeah, I am a man who loves to revel in Hollywood's misery and would love more than anything to point at them and be like, your model's not working. And mostly I think it is. But to criticize Tenet's performance in the state of the affairs as the world is in now seems disingenuous. And I almost wonder if if studios can actually use this as license to be like our films performed better than you guys know. Like if a movie actually isn't streaming very well, they can just be like, huge success, and we wouldn't know. We have no way of knowing.
Yeah, it's the Netflix numbers thing of like they have a shitty Netflix original come out and then they're like, it had the most views of all time in history of the world. And well, what constitutes a view? Like, is that a full playthrough, or is it someone turned it on for 5 minutes and decided they didn't want to watch it anymore? And like, are they counting that as a view? And it's, there's a lot of mystery sort of behind the curtain that we don't get to see with their claims about the success of certain films and streaming and all of that.
Yeah, Lifetime used to boast certain numbers too, and I'd be like, yeah, but if most people are just folding laundry to your movie, does that count as a view? And so like if I'm putting on Netflix to have noise in the house while I do chores, that shouldn't count, but they have no way of knowing. I have no way of telling them. So, Hollywood can actually now use the streaming platforms to tell whatever narrative they need to do whatever their board of directors thinks they need to do next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's a sad state of things.
Yes. So, but, as a sequel goes, this one, pretty good. I agree with you. I think going in this direction has been more fun. I was sort of mad on the fifth movie. The scene with the safe at the end was kind of interesting. But other than that, it took us a long time to get there. But, each movie after that has sort of gotten bigger and crazier, and so I'm on board. So that's what makes it interesting that you didn't like the eighth movie, because I feel like it's just more of the same, but maybe that's the problem?
I think part of it is it's more of the same. Part of it is that a lot of it, like one of the things, like I was saying, is sort of the adherence to practical visuals. And then I think in the next one, with the need to make it bigger and drive the stakes higher, there's more reliance on CGI in order to get there. And I think that that's something that sort of detracts from the film overall a lot, because I think that's one of those things where it's like, there is an impressiveness built into the fact that when you have a movie that's over the top, that they're doing things with real cars and real explosions. And then if you're raising the stakes higher and then you switch over to computers, it's less impressive. And then it's like, well, you can just go watch anything then, because like the team behind it isn't doing anything unique with the sort of insane concepts that they're bringing to the story. And so I think that that's something that, for me at least, kind of puts a damper on my sort of liking of the franchise and like where it's going. And maybe it's the thing where they bring it back a little bit. I don't know. Justin Lin's coming back for the 9th one, I believe, but we'll see sort of what direction they take it in.
Yeah, it does get tough when you have to always top yourself. You just eventually run out of room before you get, like, just, you've stretched the audience's suspension of disbelief too far. But everything else you said, I 100% agree. I think that is the right approach to filmmaking. And when you don't do that, the results you described are accurate. Well, we got to start to wrap things up here. We sort of went over our last looks briefly. Last looks, Braden, is where we go when we look at our, seasonal actor and we say, why did you make this movie? We clearly know, one, he's already sort of in it contractually, and two, they paid him a lot of money to not have that many days of work. So it's sort of a no-brainer. Right? It's this big multinational film. It does well. It makes him a worldwide star. Just keep the hits coming. It makes sense to me. And because he's contractually obligated and they want him to be himself, he doesn't really have to act too much. So here we are today. Well, Braden, do you have any place, you have a website or an Instagram or your films available somewhere for people to see? Where can people go if they want to find out more about you and the things you do?
They can go right now. The best place would be on Instagram. The handle's braden.kimball. To see a couple small projects I have, and then I have a teaser trailer up there for the short film I'm currently in post-production on that hopefully will be finished later in the spring, I believe. And so you can keep an eye out for it there.
Highly recommend that teaser. The working title was Donor. Is it still Donor?
Yep, that's still the title.
All right, so definitely look for that on his Instagram. That will be in the show notes below. Joe, we hope you feel better. I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com and social media, presumably with a similar-sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Joe, say goodnight.
Good night. Causing confusion, disturbing the peace. It's not an illusion. We run in the streets. So bye-bye to all you groupies and gold niggas. Is there a bumper on your ass? No, nigga. I'm doing 100 on the highway. So if you do the speed limit, get the fuck out of my way. I'm DUI, hardly ever caught sober. And you about to get ran the fuck over. Move, bitch. Get out the way. Get out the way, bitch. Get out the way. Move, bitch. Get out the way.
everybody, and welcome back to Zaku. Jesus, that's my other thing I do. Sorry about that.